Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan from stepbysteppainting.net, and in this acrylic painting tutorial, I'm going to show you how to paint the blue Tuscan door. I love the color palette on this one. I'm going to first go over the colors that I used for this painting. So we have Liquitex Basics Mars Black, Titanium White, Red Oxide. Don't get to use this color often, but that was used to make the really pretty warm color in the wall. Cad Yellow Medium Hue, and then in the door, we have Phthalo Blue and Bright Aqua Green to create that really pretty blue color. Alizarin Crimson, Green Deep Permanent, and Raw Umber, not pictured, but I also used that color. As far as brushes go, we have a 1-inch flat brush. I used that in the background. If you don't have the 1-inch flat, you can use the 3/4 flat. I also used the 3/4 flat for the door. A 12 bright brush, that was helpful for painting the border around the door. A 4 round brush for all the fine little details. All of the colors and brushes and materials used for this are in the tutorial instructions for this, and let's go ahead and get started. So I'm working on an 11 by 14, and I'm going to start with my 1-inch flat brush, and I'm going to create this really pretty warm yellowish color in the wall. And we're actually going to paint our entire canvas the color of the wall, so this is going to be kind of the under painting base layer of this. And so it is a combination of titanium white, cad yellow medium, and red oxide. On your palette, start by mixing a lot of white and just a little bit of red oxide on the corner of your brush and a little bit of the yellow on the other corner of the brush. Kind of mix them together, but don't mix them all the way. We're going to fill the entire canvas with these angled strokes of these colors blending on the canvas. So you can see we have really kind of yellowish color, that red oxide is kind of blending with it to make kind of an orangish color too, and that white is going to soften that color. So we're going to need a lot of white for this. The background should not be super dark. It's kind of a medium color, and it's going to vary throughout the canvas. So as I'm working to fill this up and as I reload, I'm going to grab different amounts of these colors. So that time around I grabbed more white, and I'm just letting that white kind of blend and do its thing. And I'm just going to keep going around the canvas, filling this up, blending them together, long angled strokes. We're trying to kind of mimic the texture of the stucco of the building, and we're going to try to make it kind of rustic. So let's have our colors not blend all the way. So we have a variation of yellow and that red oxide and the white. So upper left corner, that ended up being a little bit extra yellow. If you're doing this and it's too yellow, you can always grab your white to soften that yellow and a little bit of red to give it more of an orange tone to it. You're going to find that you need a lot of white for this, especially with how soft we're creating the colors. So long, big angled strokes of blended color. Really pretty combination. We're going to fill the entire canvas, so don't worry about where the sidewalk is, where the door is right now. Just fill your canvas with this beautiful combination of color. Just do your best to try not to blend it all the way. And so I'm not going to leave a gap down here. I'm going to fill the rest of that up. Same colors. When we're done with this step, we do not need to wait for this to dry, but go ahead and rinse your brush off, and we're going to do a little bit of measuring. We want to place a horizontal sort of line on on the bottom, so right here. If this is super wet, you don't want to place your ruler right here per se, but you can still kind of measure and mark it. I'm doing 2.5 inches from the bottom and then a horizontal line. We don't need this line to be super dark, just so we can see where it is, because we're going to go back over this and paint our sidewalk. I'm going to use the same brush for this, and we're going to do red oxide and titanium white. First, load your 1-inch flat brush in the red oxide, and let's start on the bottom. So yes, this is a similar color, or the same color we used in the background, so it's not going to be super dark, only we're not mixing the yellow with this. We'll mix a little bit of white with this, but on the bottom it's darker, and then on the top it's lighter, so a little bit of white on the brush to blend. So we're trying to create this gradient of the red oxide where it's dark at the bottom and then it blends so it's a little bit lighter towards the edge of that line. So we want to try to stay under that line. We can use the tip of the brush to kind of define that horizontal line, and then just gently blend your light color. So that light color may end up just blending in with the rest of the background, and that's fine. It still shows a little bit of a different area because we're doing left and right strokes. So there is our sidewalk, our first layer. Later on we'll add some texture on this sidewalk, but for now let's rinse off the brush and let's make sure that our background is dry before doing this next step, because we will be making measurements and using painter's tape next. So we want our door to be about 4 inches wide. So I'm going to mark the 4-inch area in the center, and that ended up not being centered. So I am adjusting that here. I guess if you wanted your door to be kind of off-centered in the painting, that's fine, but I wanted mine to be relatively centered. So we can find the center of the canvas. So it's 11 inches wide, so the center point would be like 5.5. So we can mark 5.5, and then we can do 2 inches on the side of that. So it would make a 4-inch door. So there's 5.5, and then we can do a mark at 2 inches and another mark at 2 inches. And then we'll be using painter's tape. So this tape is super helpful with doing this door structure, and our T-squares. So I can line this up on the edge of the canvas here so that my tape line is perpendicular with the side of the canvas. So I can place my tape line, and right here is where we really want to press down because we don't want any of that dark blue color to seep under our tape. We'll be painting our dark blue door on the inside of this tape line. So then my other piece of tape, I'm going to do the same thing, use my T-square ruler, make sure that's lined up nice and perpendicular, and place my tape line so that we have 4 inches of space in the middle between the tape. So it should be relatively perpendicular. If it's a little bit slanted, that's okay. And then we can use that to make sure that's lined up. And then right here, we're going to just draw an arc. So the height of this door is about 8 inches. So if I measure from the top part of that arc to the bottom, that's about 8 inches. And then let's load our palette with Phthalo Blue and bright aqua green. Rinse off our brush. I'm going to switch to the 3/4 inch flat wash brush, smaller area, and load that in the water. And let's grab our bright aqua green and a teeny bit of white on the brush, and let's start painting our door. So this entire door is all painted with vertical up and down strokes, and you guessed it, we're going to blend colors, but we're not going to blend it all the way. So we want to create some streaks of different blues in there. We'll be using that we'll be introducing that phthalo blue really quickly here. But before I do that, I'm going to apply tape right here too, so that this color doesn't go under this line. So there's phthalo blue on the tip of my brush. Phthalo blue blends so beautifully with this bright aqua green. The bottom part of the door is darker, so we want to kind of do that here. So our darker color is the phthalo blue. We're doing mostly that phthalo blue right there at the bottom, but it's still grabbing streaks of that bright aqua green. And all up and down strokes, trying not to over blend the color. We want those streaks. And then the top part of the door, also dark, where that arc is. And you can use the tip of your brush to kind of outline that arc so that you get that shape in there. Cut that shape in, and then you can do your vertical marks down from there. So mostly phthalo blue at the top, and then towards the middle of our door, it starts getting that pretty aqua color that blends with the phthalo blue. So I'm just using the full width of the brush and dragging that color down. This far right side of the door, I'm going to add a little bit more blue to make that darker, and then grab the aqua, blend that a little bit so the central part of the door is more of that aqua and light color. And then the far left side of the door, where that doorknob is going to have a little bit lighter color. We can grab a little bit of that white. So you see me load just a teeny bit of white right there in the tip of the brush. You don't need a lot of this white, just a few lighter streaks that kind of gently blend in there. It's really going to give it that kind of rustic look. I'm going to grab a bit more of this phthalo blue, lower right corner area. Make sure that's nice and dark. Dragging this all across the bottom area. Bottom part of the door is nice and dark. Right side of the door, dark. Top arc of the door, dark. So when we're done with this, we can gently lift our painter's tape and we'll have a nice, pretty, defined door shape. When this is all pulled off, we will be painting the border of the door next. Let's rinse our 3/4 flat brush off. Our orange paint watercolor is going to turn brown. And let's use, so for the door, for the border of the door, it's the same colors we used in the background, but we need to make a lighter version of it so it stands out. So we're going to need some fresh titanium white, red oxide, and cad yellow medium on there. And let's go ahead and mix that color. It's the same color as the background, so a lot of white and just a teeny bit of red and yellow. And then add more white to that, so kind of test it out. So it should show up lighter. So if you're testing it out like right there, if it's not lighter, add a little bit more white to it. This border, I'm not going to draw it or anything, I'm just going to paint it in. And I'm just going to start by using just the tip of the brush to outline the outer edge of this door. So none of this goes over any of the blue that we just painted. You want to be really careful not to drag any of that wet blue into this. So you want to only be on the outside of that door. And just using the tip of the brush, this is the 12 bright brush, using just the tip of it, and I'm just outlining that with kind of a thick line, and we're going to gradually make that line thicker, but for now this is just to define where that border is and to really kind of cut in and get that shape. So because your background kind of varies, some of this border may not have enough contrast, it may not show up in some areas, and that's okay. We can do something to kind of outline this later. But right now I'm going to continue using that color and do this bottom edging. So using just the tip of the brush, I made that about a 1/4 inch thick. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. So it's the same color as the border around the door. I'm just going to use my brush to gradually make it thicker. And again, it's about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch. You can go a little bit higher if you want for that border. And I'm going to go back to my door and I'm going to make this gradually thicker, but still using the tip of the brush, still using the same colors. So it's about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. Gradually making this line thicker. It doesn't have to be perfectly consistent throughout. This is a painting. You don't need it to be perfect. And if your color is changing, you can, that's okay if the color is changing. Like if you go to reload and it's like a different kind of tint of what you created, that's fine. I'm going to gradually make this right side about the same thickness. So going back using the tip of the brush, just very slowly making that border thicker. We're going to do a little bit of outlining with this, but we're not outlining the entire thing. So we don't even have to rinse our brush for this, but if your brush is overloaded with too much paint, you can rinse. Let's load it in just the red oxide on the tip of the brush, and let's loosely outline the outer parts of our border. The top part of the bottom border and then the outer part of the border that goes around the door. So by loosely outlining, I mean that we're not outlining the entire thing and there's a lot of gaps left. So you can see I didn't outline everything. I can add a little bit of outlining to the inner part of the border too. Just going to be really careful not to make this go over my door. So like right here, that top part of the arc, I can outline that with the red oxide, and right here on the inner part, I can outline that. So this really helps this stand out because it's the same color as the background, but now it looks different and we can see it better just by adding that darker color and loosely outlining that shape. We are going to keep going with this door and add our next layer of details. This is going to be done with Mars Black, and we will be using a number 4 round brush, and we're going to be painting the wood texture and a few cracks in the door. So let's grab our 4 round, load that in the water, and we want to leave that water on the brush and kind of distribute that into the black. And I'm going to twist my brush to get that paint right there on the tip of the brush. And also that little bit of water helps loosen that black for this fine detail we're going to paint. Let's start at the bottom of the door. So we're going to paint that kind of opening at the bottom of the door, that crack. That's because the door is not flush to the ground. There's a little bit of an opening. So we're going to paint a black line all the way across the bottom, and that's going to create that opening, that gap. And then we will also use this to create the panels of this. This is a wooden door, and so we're going to use a very, very light hand for this because we want this line to be super thin, and we're just creating these vertical lines down the door. And you can use a ruler if you are a little bit nervous about these lines, but because our door, we're trying to make it look kind of old and rustic, If these end up being kind of slanted, that's okay. Or kind of uneven, that's going to help with what we're trying to achieve here. But just very loosely. These lines, I'm not measuring them, I'm kind of estimating them. They need to be relatively the same distance apart, but they don't need to be perfectly the same apart. So it's about a ½ inch between each of the lines. And again, it does not have to be perfect. So very loosely, just barely letting that brush skid the canvas to create those thin lines. And it helps to add a teeny bit of water into that black, loosens that black up, and it gets it to be flowy enough to make these lines. And we can do some cracks. So I did one crack down here at the bottom of the door. A little kind of opening, and then kind of split, the wood kind of splits up. And then I did another one over here on the lower left. You can do more if you want. And then I also did the wood grain texture. So I'm going to do a lot of knots in this wood, a lot of like little vertical marks. So to do the knots, you create kind of like a pointed oval shape. And then you do like a few contouring lines around it. It's almost like an eye in the wood. But again, only little bits of paint on the tip of the brush. And you're just letting that brush barely skid the surface of the canvas. You're not pressing down hard at all with it. Little tiny vertical marks all throughout. This creates that wood texture. And then at the top, we have this top of the door is a little bit more dark and shadowy, so I'm going to add some more, a little bit extra of these like vertical marks with the black to kind of add to that darkness up there. You can add a few larger knots in the lighter area. Not all of the panels have to have the texture. We can just add the texture on a few of them. And then we can do our doorknob. So our doorknob is in the center of the door, and it's just a simple circle. If you want to create a more elaborate doorknob, you're welcome to change this up a bit. But I went simple with this and just did a circle. So this is the black circle right in the center of the door. Center left of the door. And it's not very big, it's maybe less than ½ an inch in diameter. Then I want to kind of outline again a little bit of a gap on the sides of the door where that border is, just on the left and the right, using the black. I'm not going over my red oxide I did. This outline is on the very edge of the door, so it kind of flesh with our red oxide outline. Next, I am going to do the pots. So we have a kind of rose tree growing in our pot on the left and a little green plant growing in the pot on the right. So I'm going to draw very basic. If you feel confident enough and you don't want to draw these out first, you don't need to, but I just like to kind of pre-draw what I'm going to do to kind of get an idea of that, and then I can always adjust that. So I did kind of a little bit of a tall planter on the left, and a little planter on the right. It's more rounded. It's a circular shape with a little elliptical opening shape on the top. You want to make sure that the bottom of these pots are not too low in the ground. They need to look like they're they don't need to be right up against the wall, but pretty close to the edge of the wall. And then I have Alizarin Crimson Hue Permanent, and that's going to be the base color of the pot on the left. So I'm going to load my number 4 round brush in the Alizarin Crimson, and I'm just going to kind of do 2 curves on the left and the right, and then curve it on the bottom, and just kind of fill the middle part with curves. So pretty much just painting the pot solid coat of this Alizarin Crimson color. You can adjust your drawing, so if you drew the pot and you don't have to paint it in exactly how you drew it, so you can adjust it as you're painting it in. And then we will add some darker colors in this and some lighter colors for highlight and shadowing. Make sure for now that this is all filled in. It's a little bit flat on the bottom. I'm going to grab a little bit of black, the tip of the brush, and I didn't have to rinse the alizarin off, just the black, and we can do the inside part of that pot with solid black. And then we can take this black and kind of drag it on the left side and the bottom to make that kind of dark and shadowy. So just outline the left and then in curved strokes kind of drag that paint on the inside part so that it kind of gives it that shadow on the left. Then I'm going to add some titanium white to my palette. Grab my 4-round brush. You want to rinse the brush off for the white, otherwise you'll just get kind of a messy gray color. So a little bit of white on the tip of the brush, and we're going to do the highlight. So the right side of the pot. It's okay if this is still wet and it blends, but like a curve, and then a little bit of curve at the top where the opening is. We can make this abstract. It doesn't have to be a realistic looking pot. And then we can paint the trunk of our rose bush next. So that was done with raw umber. We have our number 4 round brush with the raw umber, and I'm just going to kind of slowly paint this trunk. It's a little bit thick at the bottom. I'm going to make it look twisty, so it's going to kind of sway to the left and then sway to the right. It's going to get a lot thinner and kind of go to a point. And before that brown dries, I'm going to grab white on my brush and create the lighter color of the trunk. I'm going to make it look like it's twisting around itself. So I just created a second trunk next to that with that lighter color, and it overlaps the trunk, kind of twists around with that lighter color. And we can make a third little twisty piece. It kind of twists around that and then goes back up to a point. And so this part of the branch, it starts to get very thin, and then it's going to kind of hug the top edge of the door, so it's going to kind of hang over without overlapping the door. So we can take this branch and we can extend it and curve it around and then kind of back up, and then we can create some other smaller branches in here too. So I'm loading my brush back in the brown, the raw umber, but if you want to add a little bit of white to some of these smaller branches, you can. So we just have 3 main branches on this. The rest of this is going to be leaves and our abstract roses on it, but let's let that branch dry before we do anything else to it. I'm going to rinse that brush off and paint the pot on the right. So the right pot, I did yellow with red oxide, made kind of an orangish color, and a little bit more red oxide in there. So that was the base color, and I used black and white for highlighting and shadowing. You'll find that this color is not going to stand out as much because it's very similar to the background. So if you need to add more white to it to brighten it, or more red oxide to it to darken it, that'll help get it to show up. But I pretty much painted it the same way I did the pot on the left. So curvy strokes. This time I'm just letting that white blend with that orange color. It's making kind of a pretty peach color. And then some more red oxide, some red on the top, and then curvy strokes on the left to make that kind of darker on the left side. I'm going to rinse these colors off my brush and dry and grab just, so I'm pinching my bristles there so I can do this really fine line here with just the red oxide to outline the left and then kind of drag that in. I still want to add some more contrast in there, so I'll grab the white, do the same thing on the right side, kind of outline it, kind of drag those strokes inwards, and let's do this black here. So I did the opening part, that's black, and then I did a little bit of black on the far left and dragged that in as well. Ended up kind of looking like there's tiger stripes on this pot, but that's okay. Just dragging that in. Black is kind of taking over. So let's grab more of that red oxide, drag that in a little bit further. A little bit dark at the top. This pot ended up being multiple colors, but you can see by doing those kind of curved strokes in the center that gives your pot some depth and form to it. I'm going to rinse off my 4 round brush and go to my number 12 bright brush and do some texture work on the ground. So the texture, let's use the red oxide and titanium white. So about equal parts red and white together. It should be kind of enough to show up. If it's not showing up, you can add a little bit more white to it, but this is going to kind of vary because your ground varies in color anyway. But I'm just going to do these loose sort of left and right strokes in the ground area using just the tip of the brush. So I'm just doing little marks kind of all throughout, and I will add darker of this as well. So let's freshen up some of this red oxide, and without rinsing the brush, grab some of the red oxide and do the same thing, short little horizontal marks kind of all throughout. Let's add a little bit of black to this. So just a very, very small amount of black. You don't need a lot. And that's going to create some darker of that. It's going to make that red oxide a little bit darker. And we can use that to create some shadowy areas in our ground. So I did that very sparingly under the door, under the left side of the pot, under this right side of the pot. Well, we're going to add some intentional shadows in here next. So adding more black to the brush and just very, very gently right under this pot, left and right, very loose strokes. My brush is barely skidding the canvas, making these shadow marks. It's very light, so I'm not pressing hard with my brush, making this sort of abstract shadow under that pot. And then we can do the same right here under the door, very loose left and right strokes to create kind of shadow in the ground. We can do a little bit under our molding over here on the ground. And we can just add a few little darker marks kind of sparingly throughout. The next thing we're going to add to our painting is a little lantern on the right side. So this helps to kind of balance things out. We have the tall plant on the left, and the short plant on the right, so we can add something in this wall area. I'm going to use a number 4 round brush in Mars Black, and also adding a little bit of water to that black. I'm going to draw this lantern really quick. So it's got like a triangular top, and the angles on the triangle are kind of curved inwards on the side, and the bottom one kind of curves down. Little circle at the top, and then the kind of a stretched oval shape for the light, and the little circle and little rectangle shape underneath that. So now that we have it kind of sketched out, we can paint it in. So this is a number 4 round brush and Mars Black. Again, it helps to slightly water Mars Black down That goes for any color that we're kind of doing detail work with. You don't want to water it down to like watercolor consistency, so this shouldn't be dripping, but it helps give you more control over the paint. So I just outlined the shape and then filled it in solid. Outline the shape of the light, and that we're going to leave blank for now. This little half circle gets filled in, and then just a little stroke, a little vertical stroke on the bottom of that half circle. In this next step, I'm going to paint cracks in the wall. So this one, you want to water it down just a little bit more, almost a watercolor consistency. So we want a color that is darker than the wall, so this shows up. So use the red oxide and maybe add a little bit of black to it so that it's nice and dark. It shouldn't be too dark, but it should have enough contrast to show up. So using just the tip of the brush to paint, I started at the edge of the canvas, and you just paint kind of a line, and you can kind of wiggle your hand to make that line kind of wiggly and then branch off. You want to kind of vary the thickness slightly, so some parts of these cracks you're pressing a little bit harder on your brush to make it just a teeny bit thicker, some parts lighter to where the brush is barely kind of skidding the canvas. So I did 3 larger cracks, and I didn't do in the upper left area because I know that's going to be covered with a lot of leaves and roses. We can do one that's kind of over here outside of that edging of the door, but kind of all different. This one, maybe we can extend this crack a little bit that way, so that one looks a little bit different. Maybe we can extend this one up a little bit further so you can see a little bit of variety in the lines, in the direction they're going, and the thickness. And let's go ahead and rinse off, and we're going to start adding our lovely leaves and roses next. So I used Green Deep Permanent and Cad Yellow Medium, and I'm going to go ahead, load both of those on the palette, and kind of swirl both of those colors together. I'm going to do the plant that's in the pot in the lower right. And I want to start out with a darker green and then layer on lighter greens on top of that. So with that green and yellow that I mixed, I added a little bit of black to that kind of on the side. You don't want to add black to all of it because we'll still need that pure green without the black, but the darker black. So we'll start with that. And I'm just going to do these like curved lines, almost like we're painting grass or a palm tree. So the line starts out kind of thick, and then just kind of stroking upwards, just releasing the pressure really quick. And that's going to get each of your paint strokes to kind of form into a pointed stroke. So it's thick on the bottom, and then you release the pressure. So really quick strokes. You release the pressure, and then it goes thin. So thick, thin, thick, thin. You can have some leaves hanging down. So this is the darker layer of the plant. When this dark layer dries, we'll go back and add our lighter layer on that. And you are definitely welcome to change the plants. So if you want to do like a flowered plant or something else in that pot, you're definitely welcome to change that up. I'm going to take this green. So this is just the yellow and the green. I didn't rinse my brush. There's probably still some black in that, but that's okay. So with these leaves, I'm going to be very kind of abstract about it because that would be very tedious to just paint all those leaves in that way. I'm going to do one stroke style leaves. So I'm just taking my brush and doing one little stroke and really just kind of scattered throughout this rose tree branch. And they don't all have to be touching the branch. They can be kind of clustered throughout. So like right here, the branch doesn't go that way, but I can take those leaves and extend those out in little bunches. Let's start varying that leaf color. So we can add a little bit of white, mix that white into that green on your palette. So now you have a lighter version. So with these leaves, we can have some leaves that are much darker, some that are lighter. So when we go to reload, we can kind of change the consistency of that. And then we can take this light green color that we created and go back over our darker plant. So right here, this is our lighter layer. I am not trying to cover up all those dark strokes I created. This is just another layer. So I went and added that, and adding that lighter color on top of the darker color really adds depth to that plant. Next, I'm going to add a highlight to the doorknob with titanium white. So I just did a very basic curve on the left side of that doorknob, and I'm going to finish off the light. So we're doing this while the green is drying before we do the roses. So the white on the left side right here, little highlight right there, titanium white. Grab a little bit of yellow. So this is yellow and white mixed together. With yellow and white, I want to go ahead and paint all of that in. So it's not going to be super bright because it's almost the same color as the background right now. But what we can do is we can grab just white. So you can wipe the brush off, you can rinse, but grab just the titanium white and then paint a little white light right there in the center. So you don't want to cover all of your yellow, so you're making a smaller circle with that white, and then you can take more white and just make a really bright dot. So that's going to make it look like that lantern is kind of glowing. And then we can add all these lovely roses. So I used Alizarin Crimson and Titanium White for this, and I like to paint these sort of abstract style roses. So what I'm doing here is I'm painting just the shape. So you can start out by just doing like a circle, but I like to take that circle and make it kind of wobbly on the sides of the circle to make it look like the shape of the petals on the circumference of the circle. So you do the darker color first, and then before your first layer dries, and you don't need to rinse the brush off, just grab titanium white right there on the tip of the brush, start in the center, and do these little curved, I call them C strokes, like the letter C. You start in the center of each of the circles, you do curve, and you kind of stagger those curves outwards until you get to the outer part of the flower, and that white part contrasts against the darker part, gives the impression that it looks like an abstract rose. So keep it very basic. We're going to do a lot of these roses, so it'd be very tedious if we tried to make all of them look super realistic. We're just doing this very kind of abstract. So you're doing that to all of those roses, and then you can go back and do your dark layer once you're done with that first set of roses. And then you can go back with dark and do another set. So I recommend just doing like maybe 5 or 6 or 3 or 4, just a bunch of little circles first. And then before those dry, go back with your white. So some of those you can even like do like dots, kind of like the leaves. So maybe those are smaller rosebuds that aren't fully bloomed. So, but you just want to make sure that you add your white layer before it dries. So really you're scattering them everywhere. So I did a whole bunch of the dark, and then I'll go in with the white, teeny tiny bit of white on the brush, and do your little curved strokes on the inside. And you can see that this is done very loosely because there's so many roses. You can add some larger ones up here. So really it's up to you how many you want to add. If you want to do more than this or less than this, you have this whole upper left sort of quadrant of the painting to fill with these beautiful abstract roses. Also, if you need to go back and add more leaves, you're welcome to. I'm going to add more leaves. should have mentioned that we probably could have rinsed our water out by now. It didn't really affect the color of the roses. But if you find that it is messing with your paint colors, definitely you can rinse your water out. Start with some clean water. I'm going to take this green, kind of add that all throughout, really fill this area up. Maybe bring this up so it kind of goes off the edge of the canvas on the top. Make some lighter colors in there. I'm going to go silent here for a bit. This does take quite a bit of time to do. You're just really filling this whole area up with more green, more roses. So you decide how much or how little you would like. I found the more roses and greenery I added, the prettier it was. So I will go silent here. The last thing I'm going to do is add just a little pop of yellowish green in our plant. And I'm going to rinse, grab white, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green to make kind of a light yellow green. Do one final layer in there, just adds a pop of bright yellow green in there, and we will call it finished. This is the conclusion of how to paint the blue Tuscan door. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.